Well, the first score is in, and Houston, we may have a problem. According to the non-partisan Congressional Budget Office, the big, beautiful bill overall is going to increase the federal deficit by $2.3 trillion over the next 10 years. The tax portion of the bill alone will raise the federal deficit by $3.8 trillion over those 10 years. And here's the twist. Even though the big, beautiful bill does not cut Medicare, it doesn't even say anything about Medicare. The CBO says the deficit this bill creates will trigger another law called Pay-As-You-Go or PAYGO, and that will automatically significantly cut Medicare spending, whether it's in the big, beautiful bill or not. Now, I'm going to explain the PAYGO part of this in a second, but first let's talk about this initial CBO score. Before I really get into it, I just want to say the CBO score is always controversial. The score isn't always 100% accurate because the CBO is projecting costs over 10 years. Lawmakers always politicize the CBO score. If the score is bad, the party trying to push the bill that's causing the bad score says the CBO is bullshit. They have no idea what they're talking about, and the opposition points to the CBO score as if it came down from heaven. But the bottom line is the CBO is the gold standard here. It's what Congress has worked with for decades. Regardless of who's on the winning side, it just is what it is. So if you want to read the CBO score, I'm going to email it out to you in tonight's Facts HQ email, so definitely make sure you sign yourself up. Now, to the actual score. Again, this is just the first estimate, but generally the CBO says if the big, beautiful bill is enacted, not only is it going to increase the federal deficit by trillions of dollars, generally over those next 10 years, federal resources would decrease for the lowest income households because of the drastic cuts to Medicaid and SNAP, and federal government resources would increase for the highest earning households because of the reduction in taxes that they would owe. Now, here's the chart from the CBO that shows it to you. You can see between the years 2027 through 2033, the lowest income households will see reduced resources, while the wealthiest will see increased resources. Now, it's true that the CBO says that this bill absolutely cuts spending. The CBO says the bill will save the federal government $965 billion over the next 10 years in just cuts to SNAP and Medicaid. But in reality, that translates to, according to the CBO, about 8.6 million people losing their health insurance. Of those 8.6 million, 7.6 million would lose Medicaid, and 1 million more would lose health insurance through the changes being made to the Affordable Care Act. As I mentioned, the CBO says because of the way the big, beautiful bill is written right now, the tax portion alone will increase the federal deficit by $3.8 trillion over the next 10 years. Not only is this a huge problem for Republicans who've been screaming for years that Congress needs to stop the spending so the federal deficit goes down, which we are now learning is not going to happen under this bill, it turns out that $3.8 trillion deficit increase will trigger that pay-go law of 2010. That law says if the 10-year score on any new legislation that changes taxes, fees, or mandatory spending increases the deficit, sequestration kicks in. In the pay-go law, that means funding from mandatory programs is withheld to offset that deficit increase. So to eliminate that overage, the CBO says the pay-go law demands $230 billion must be cut in 2026 and every year after. That will include a mandatory cut of $45 billion in fiscal year 2026 from Medicare. The reason why it's just $45 billion in the first year is because the pay-go law caps Medicare cuts at 4% a year. The CBO says that means, though, over the next 10 years, if this isn't figured out, Medicare spending would be reduced by $490 billion. So how do we prevent the pay-go law from kicking in? Well, Republicans, and again, I'm saying Republicans because they are 100% in charge of this bill and the whole process. Republicans can find $230 billion in cuts from the budget every single year over the next 10 years, or they can waive the pay-go provision. But while that may fly in the House, it probably isn't going to fly in the Senate because waiving pay-go requires 60 votes, and it doesn't seem like Democrats are willing to waive it. So we're going to have to see how this all shakes out. Again, if you want to read the CBO score or the letter that details the pay-go issue, I'm going to email both of them out to you in tonight's Facts HQ email, so make sure you sign yourself up.